welcome to He's a Giant, a pod about all things college football and all things Giants football. I'm your host, Sal, with my co-host, Monty. Apologies to everybody about being late. Had some stuff come up that I had to deal with, but we are here about half an hour late, but we are doing our final five quarterbacks of the 2025 NFL draft. And as I teased out Monty earlier on the timeline, I'm glad you guys are here, but God, I hope that we are not dealing with these guys come the NFL draft
Yeah,
time. But how are you doing, man?
doing good, man. The chat is letting us have it right now.
Yeah,
Peter
that's
would start before the 2025 draft. I'd be
no,
dying.
no. Yeah, my apologies to all of you. All right. But we are gonna definitely go through these five guys. Um, I'm gonna be honest, like to get through these guys, I don't know how you felt, man, but get through these five guys was that was a test of resolve.
There is some interest in there. It was weird. I mean, like some guys graded out higher than I thought they would. Some guys surprised me, like for good and for worse. I don't know, man. It's interesting, but yeah, it's. I mean, there's not any guys that suddenly are like, we should take this guy in the first round or anything like that.
No, no, I don't think there was anybody. There was no sleeper in this group that were like, wow, first rounder right there, you know?
Yeah,
I
no,
think that was
there is some guys we'll talk about. There's one guy we haven't really even talked about, so it should be interesting. Usually we go over our thoughts to each other, so you guys can get kind of our first impression of these guys live with each other. There's one guy who, if he goes back to school, I definitely saw some upside, but we'll get into it. But that thank you, Peter. Yes, I was followed by Peter Schrager. Big big A-list guy over here, Monty.
the
um,
A-lister here. This is our final pod together as Monty leaves and heads towards Peter Schrager's house
yeah,
afterwards to go
Peter
plan his
Schrager and
future.
then co-host in the new year. Speaking of, we won't be we're not gonna do an episode next week, Christmas and all that. So Merry Christmas, everybody. Got my Christmas sweater on. Got dog and Santa.
Merry
um,
Christmas, everybody.
but yeah, man. Yeah, it should be interesting finishing up these QBs. Obviously, not the same as last year. Like I said, last year we had legitimate QBs who went in the first round in our second episode. That's not the case here. But there's some interest. It should be interesting to talk about these guys. But aside from the QBs, before we get into it, looks like John Mara's got his goons out this week, huh?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it was pretty clear, especially starting with Paul Schwartz, coming out with his article basically outlining the what's the term they use now? The concept of a plan. And the concept of the
Mhm.
plan was we're just gonna blame Brian Dable, let's fire him and keep Joe Shane. That sort of sums it up. But
Mhm.
hey, what if we just did this, guys? Like, they're not a package deal, says John Mara. Um, felt like John Mara was, or maybe I shouldn't say John Mara, somebody from the Mara camp. Let's put it that way. Because I'm not 100% sure the old man is the one behind a lot of this stuff. But I do feel like there are people in that building, namely, Chris Mara, um, and some of the people that have been part of the Giants organization for years, who might have been sending some signals out. What were your thoughts when you heard that news? That well, you saw the Paul Schwartz report at least.
Yeah, I mean, it unfortunately didn't surprise me. It's the same shit that this organization does every year. I mean, I'm sure there's some aspect of it that's John Mara, but I mean, like, same time, I'm sure there's a lot of it. This is Joe Shane trying to save his own job to some extent. I mean, you saw this with Dave Gettleman when his job was on the line. Watching the video that Paul Schwartz came put out, the one part that kind of pissed me off was like basically he was like, yeah, I don't think that like Joe Shane is going to agree to wanting to like move on from Brian Dable. So basically like Joe Shane's gonna have to give him like an ultimatum. It's like, so you trust him enough to keep him, but you don't trust him enough to make his own decision with the head coach. It's like can't go both ways, buddy. Like if he has that much conviction, you either believe in him or you don't.
No, I agree. I mean, it was just it's just I guess there were two ways I interpretate what was going on. And shout out to everybody in the chat, including Peter, Chris P, Authentic, everybody. Thank you guys for being patient and being here. Antonio, I know I saw you in here. Um, the way I saw it was one of two things when I really reflected on the whole report by Schwartz. One was either the Giants are they truly they truly are just this tone deaf to what's going on. People flying planes for God's sakes, week after week saying fire everybody, empty stadiums, fans, livid about the state of the team, really undergoing the worst team I've seen in my life as a Giants fan. I'm pretty old. I've never seen anything like this before. Um, that despite that, they're digging their heels in and saying we really want to bring Joe Shane back. So we're just going to put this article out, just see how it's received. But we want to let people know this is our plan. The other part of it, I thought of it was like maybe there are people in the building who are throwing the idea out as a feeler just to
Hmm.
see how the fans react, but fully realize that if the reaction is bad, which obviously it was and it was going to be, that and they got their kind of market research back, that this is a bad idea, that they would be able to pivot quickly to maybe another plan, that one that maybe now would people would find to be more acceptable, that they might not have thought of it being acceptable a few weeks ago, right? Any plan
Hmm.
at this point, when you lower the standards to like, we think we're going to bring back Joe Shane, then psychologically what you're doing is you're enraging people about an outcome they thought was completely unimaginable, and then what you're doing is you're saying to them, as long as I give you anything but that, it becomes palatable. So specifically, and I don't think this is a bad solution personally, but like specifically, might they be greasing the wheels for replacing Shane and Dable, but promoting internally to a guy like Brandon Brown, to name him the GM and say, well, we did get rid of, you guys didn't want Shane and Dable back, but got rid of him. But guess what? This guy's internal. He's strong. He's respected around the league. We don't have to blow up our whole infrastructure. And I think it would be better received now than it would have been a week ago. What do you think about that?
Yeah, man, I know you've talked about that, and it's an interesting idea. I do think that if we stayed in in house with a guy like Brandon Brown, I do think he would get some initial grace. I think there would be some initial like people upset, not really, kind of doing the same, but I do think at the end of the day, people would give him a chance. The thought is just how long that would last if we start to see some failures, if you're not truly separating from this regime. That's the part that worries me a little bit. We talked about that a little bit offline. But I could see maybe that's a thought from them. Um, the one thing I want to say about all this is, like you were saying, Sal, like they are trying to get this to be okay with the fans. They're trying to see if the fans are okay with. So, we don't have as big a platform as some of these other guys have, but as the platform we have, I want to tell all fans to continue to be vocal, continue to say that this is not acceptable, that we demand change, that you can't just spit in our face and give us a bad product and accept us be okay with it. And if not, there's going to be pushback from us. There's going to be loss of us attending games. You are probably going to lose PSLs. I already know a bunch of fans who are season ticket holders, who have been season ticket holders from their parents or grandparents, who are legitimately considering not re-upping and just throwing the money away. That is where we are at with this, and we need to continue to be vocal about that. I give credit to guys like the Talking Giants who have really, over the last couple weeks have been vocal about it. They have a very large platform, and that's good for the movement from the fans. You're not going to see this type of stuff from the beat reporters. The beat reporters are going to be the ones, for the most part, who are in the ownership pocket, and they will be putting out things positively to try to support these guys because that is how they get their access. Not everybody, but a lot of these guys. Um, Different. It's a different world, though. We live in a lot of podcasts, a lot of power from fans and with their platforms. We're just a small portion of it, but I want to continue to tell you guys, continue to be loud, continue to say that this is not okay.
Yeah, I think they will respond to the fan base. Logic will dictate. Like you can't objectively look at the product the Giants are putting out. They're 2-12. They're the worst offense in the NFL. They're unwatchable. It's really an unwatchable product. It's awful on both sides of the ball. The special teams is probably the best unit, which is sad to say. And they have no depth. Guys are now hurt, and with guys hurt, you've ripped open the wound and seen what's underneath, right? And there's nothing there. It's an empty cupboard of talent that Joe Shane has spent 3 years carefully assembling. Where we got UDFA's up and down the roster. No disrespect to these guys. I know they're playing hard to try to earn attention. They're trying to get a shot to get another crack at an NFL team. But this is not an NFL team. Like this is an embarrassment. Like no team should have to be at this position. I don't care how many injuries you have. You shouldn't look like this. No quarterback, no plan, no offense, no depth, no D line, no secondary. Like just this is embarrassing. I don't know how you can have that product on the field, see the results were, putting up 13, 14 points per game, getting destroyed, at home handily every single time we play there, embarrassed by the good teams, can't even beat the bad teams. We are the worst team in the NFL. And then, like, with a straight face, try to sell your fans on, I think we should bring these guys back. Like, that's just categorically a farcical proposition. And I don't know how they can sell this to the fan base. I really don't. I don't think they will. I think fans, like you said, should be vocal and active and say we're not okay with this shit. We demand better. We are paying customers. We shouldn't have our money and our attention spit on like this. And I think they will. I think fans are going to naturally show the rage that you saw after 2021 when the Giants try to keep Joe Judge.
Hmm.
Except I think it's going to be a lot worse this time. I really, because I think this is actually worse.
Which is kind of crazy to me because I don't feel as like look I need to move on from these guys. That's clear as day. But I don't feel as like in a desperate situation as I did there. But I think the frustration where fans have built, like you didn't see airplanes in 2021. Seen two this year. Like you didn't see that many paper bags in 2021. You see a lot of paper bags overheads. Like
Yeah,
the
it's the
frustration's built up.
it's the cumulative effect of this going on for years and years and years. And I think people are just fed up. They gave this guy 3 years to build a team. The bar was so low for Joe Shane. I think that's something that's not talked about enough. The bar was extremely low. Just clear Dave Gettleman, and you're probably going to be forgiven by a lot of people. And just have a functional appearing product after a few years that looks like it's trending in the right direction. And he hasn't cleared it. And I think Dave Gettleman might have been the worst GM I've ever seen in New York sports history. Although now I'm beginning to wonder, is it Joe Shane?
Mhm.
It's pretty bad. Like he's at that level. So no, there's no way they can sell this to the fan base and find and have it be acceptable. If they, I'm just, in the event that they actually try to ram this through, where they say, no, we're keeping Shane or we're keeping Dable or some combination of the two. If you do this, I'm pretty sure you're going to have people first rebelling in anger as a fan base, but then just doing what's much worse, which is just tuning out. Like
Yeah.
apathy is far worse than rage, right? And
Hmm.
they're bordering on apathy at this point. So, and you touched on the Talking Giants guys. I mean, like we should probably mention them quickly. I mean, I don't want to steal their thunder. They've got their own thing going on, but it sounds like, Pat Hanlon called Bobby Skinner and complained about his video about firing Joe Shane, and I guess threw some threats about we're not going to help you anymore, something along those lines. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I don't really care about Pat Hanlon, but I'm just thinking, this is what the Giants are doing with their time. That's an executive in the Giants front office. This is what he's doing.
It drives them nuts that they used to have control of all the biggest Giants platforms and they don't anymore. It's a new world of fans. And look, and it's funny, it's like that video wasn't even that bad. It was very objective. And although it was negative, it's for good reason to be negative. You're putting a negative product out there. And just because they can't control the narrative of of some of the biggest platforms out there, it's driving them crazy, and it's embarrassing. And they need to someone like Pat Hanley needs to get with the times, and he never will. So this entire organization needs a refresh beyond the player personnel, and that's a whole other conversation. But there's a lot of people in there far behind the times.
Yeah, they got the they've got the Atlanta Falcons coming up this weekend. Um, we should touch on briefly. Michael Penix Jr., a player who I loved.
Hmm.
Um, we both liked him. I loved him coming into last year's draft. I thought he was much maligned for not the fairest of reasons, but ultimately went, top 10, went eight. Atlanta thought highly of him.
Yep.
A lot of controversy over people and their views on whether or not Atlanta should have done what they did in the QB room. You and I have had disagreements on this, but fundamentally, what they did was they looked at a team that had good talent and they had no quarterback. Their quarterback situation was Desmond Ritter and Taylor Heineke a year ago. And they basically said, we're going to load up on as many quarterbacks that are quality as we could get. And we're going to take the chance that this may not work out with one of them. But even if we have to pay money and eat it, we're going to do that. And that's exactly what they did. They paid Kirk Cousins a lot of money, played well in between, like in the middle part of the season for a few weeks, and then it looks like his leg, whatever it is, whether it's his Achilles injury, his age, whatever it is, he looks unplayable right now. So they mention Michael Penix Jr. apparently, by all reports, is looking like the better quarterback in practice. The team apparently believes in him, so he's the starter, and he's going to get the first start of his career against the Giants on Sunday in Atlanta. So irony. Irony has a real sense of humor. Uh, and here we are. Joe Shane passed on. This was one of the main quarterbacks that Joe Shane decided was not good enough for me at pick six. And here he is and making his first NFL start on Sunday. So let me get your thoughts on that and give me some predictions on what you think, how you think this might shake out.
Look, man. I mean, I think you called this weeks back, and it was an easy thing to call because it's just gotten to the point that every single decision that Joe Shane has made is blowing up in his face. Whether it was the right decision at the time or it was the wrong decision at the time, they're going to find a way for it to blow up in his face. And another way for that to happen is the next quarterback who went after they passed on the quarterback position was Michael Penix Jr. Now they are facing Michael Penix in his first start with a beat up secondary that, they're basically using this at some point as like a warm up game for Michael Penix to get his feet wet in the NFL because that is what the Giants are at this point. Giants are the team that you look at and be like, yep, this is a good warm up game for our rookie quarterback. He's going to come in there, have plenty of time to sit and learn the offense. He's great weapons, very similar to a lot of the weapons he had in Washington. You got guys like Kyle Pitts and Drake London, who are guys who you don't have to, you can kind of just get the ball near them and they'll make plays. And that's, what guys like Polk and Dunze did for him. Can throw a lot of fades to him. I think it's going to be a good week for Michael Penix. And I think I don't know stat line or anything like that, but I think you're going to walk away from this week impressed by Michael Penix.
Yeah, no, I would agree that he's probably going to look better than Kirk Cousins did because Kirk Cousins just doesn't look like an NFL quarterback right now. And I have a lot of respect for Kirk Cousins and the type of player he is, but he doesn't look like himself. And I think Penix, if nothing else, he adds some juice to the room, right? He's got a live arm, and I think he can come in and make some plays. I actually don't think that the Falcons are going to ask a rookie in his first game when they're fighting for the playoffs to put the ball on his shoulder and throw it 35 times. I don't think that's a likely proposition. I think what they're going to do is they're going to rely on their run game. They have a very good run game with Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, and they're just going to want Penix to keep defenses honest. That's my guess. If I had to guess how they would play this out, they're gonna say just throw the ball enough passing concepts, drive the ball deep a few times, make some nice intermediate throws, but keep that defense backed up a little bit so they can't key in on Bijan Robinson, and you let Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier do the work and win this game. Because if all they do is just run the ball efficiently, any team that just runs the ball efficiently the rest of the way is going to have an easy win against the Giants. Like this is easy.
We have a bad run defense, so it's a good plan and it can make things easy on Michael Penix. I agree with you. So yeah, I think it's we'll see what happens, man. But I think it's going to be a good game for Michael Penix, and it's not going to be a good luck for Joe Shane.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
I wish no ill will on anybody, but like I'm done with this guy, and I'm tired of watching his failures be, protected as if he had no choice in his own decision making. I just
Mhm.
want this to end, and I want the Giants to be on the right track. All right. With that, you want to get into this episode with the QBs? We're about 20 minutes in.
Yeah, and I'm thinking we didn't really get a chance to kind of like weigh out these scores, so let's just go through them the way we had them ranked initially, and then we'll
Mhm.
say where our rank is at the end based off our numbers.
Absolutely.
Um, so I'll go ahead and get us started. I'm just gonna go ahead and share straight from the PFF page. That way we can zoom in and everything like that. So let me go ahead and pull this page up for you guys, and here we go. So the first player that was one of the guys who just missed our initial list. Shout out Rocco out there somewhere where he's listening now or tomorrow. Quinn Ewers, quarterback from Texas. 6'2", 210 pounds. He's was a 5-star recruit. One of the highest ranked quarterback recruits ever by 247 Sports. He may be the highest. I don't remember offhand, but
Kyle
he's
Allen was the highest.
yeah, he's right up there. Redshirt junior. He's in his 4th year. He was also a former baseball player. And this year he's been hurt a little bit, but he has 66.2 completion percentage, 2,665 passing yards, 25 passing touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 148.1 passer rating, -62 rushing yards, and 1 rushing touchdown. So here's the thing about Quinn Ewers. Quinn Ewers is a very, very, very talented quarterback. He has not put it together. He has flashed it at times. He didn't play Alabama this year, so he didn't get his annual beat up on Alabama game like he's had the last couple of years. And
It helps the
he's
stats a lot.
yeah, for some reason he plays Alabama. It was no pushover, and he looks like the first overall pick every single time he plays them. He had a really good game against Michigan. It was a good defense, some NFL talent. But regardless, Quinn Ewers, very, very talented quarterback. I would say he has elite arm talent. Maybe not an elite arm, maybe not a Drake May type arm strength, but very, very talented arm. And when I watch Quinn Ewers play, um, the comparison I keep using is it looks like he's throwing a frisbee. Like the way he can spin a football, like Michael Penix is a guy who, like, when we watched him last year, I said this guy can spin it. Quinn Ewers is another guy who can spin it. And when I watch him, he can make that ball float if he needs it to float. He can make that ball like bend around like a defender. It's crazy some of the things he can do with it. And you can only see from some of the elite quarterbacks in the NFL. So that's the really intriguing thing about him. He's such a natural thrower, and there's some stuff he does well as from a quarterback position that I like outside of just his throwing. Um, you know, I think he throws with pretty good anticipation when he sees a route is going to break open. He is not afraid to and knows when to throw it to hit for it breaking open. He can you know what for a guy who's not maybe the most athletic guy in the world, he's a guy who can improvise, really good at stepping up into the pocket. That's one thing I noticed. He can step up and run and get a first down, step up and make a throw. That's kind of where he does best working, is stepping up. And he can throw from a variety of arm angles. It's a good thing to have with these modern day quarterbacks. Very dynamic player in that sense. He's a guy who I think layers of football really well. I've seen him kind of, I think that goes with the arm talent. He can really layer a football, and I've seen him make some big plays with pressure in his face this year. But the downside of it, there's a lot of glaring issues still with them. A lot of inconsistent performances, and it's really just every single year, game to game, and even like during the game, you see a lot of inconsistency. Inconsistency is the name of Quinn Ewers' game. It's been a really problem. It can range from elite to some of like the lowest in college football where he doesn't look draftable. It's gotten to those points. You know, I think he can be a slow processor at times, working through his progressions and occasionally missing like open windows to make a big play. Um, he can be erratic with accuracy. Again, kind of goes into the inconsistencies. It's definitely times where he decision making that's just like totally questionable and head scratching, where you have no idea why he did it. I don't know if you noticed this, but I noticed he checked down the ball like excessively.
Yeah.
Um, check it down, throw it away. I mean, I don't have a problem with throwing it away and stuff like that, but it's just excessively. He's being like really almost too safe with the football. And he's very sack prone. You can see it with these numbers here. 22.6 pressure to sack rate, really really not good. And he's doing that with a 7.4 average yard of target. So despite all his checkdowns and really bringing down his average depth of target, he still has a really bad pressure to sack rate, which isn't good. Um, so it's tough, man. He has true elite arm talent, and everyone's been waiting for this breakout from Quinn Ewers. And I didn't even mention he's a guy who's gotten injured every single year as a starter, which is even if he was playing great, would have been a huge red flag. So um, it's tough, man. I wanted to see a breakout from Quinn Ewers. He's a guy who, I honestly expected to find his way into the first round, but I don't see him as first round. I think he should go back to college, if I'm being honest with you, but not to Texas because Arch is going to be starting. What about you?
Yeah, I don't think I have a lot to add to that. I think you touched on the most salient points over and over again, as you should have, which is he's frustrated because he has the talent to easily be QB1 in many draft classes. Like he has elite talent. There's no doubt about it. His arm is special. He has at times flashes of amazing ability to do everything you look for in a franchise quarterback. He can throw with anticipation, he can layer throws beautifully, he can throw the deep ball, he can throw with velocity, he can move, he can release the ball quickly, he can threaten you a little bit with his legs. He's got the whole package and he's got it at a high level, but he will disappear for games on end where you're like, where is this guy? Where's the talent that I'm waiting for? And that's the frustrating part. He's just not consistent. And that's been the story of his entire college career. Like he'll have a couple of really good games and he'll have a couple of stinkers, a couple of good games and a couple of stinkers. And it's haphazard. It's not about like when he plays a good defense, he struggles and he plays a bad defense. No, he'll light up the best teams in the league. Like you said, Alabama, he torched twice. Even this year, his worst game from a production, big time throws, things like that, his worst game was easily the first Georgia game. His best game was the other Georgia game.
Yeah.
Like, like in the like in the SEC title game, it makes no sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know he had one touchdown and two interceptions in that game, but if you actually watch the game, he was making outstanding throws. He was making big time plays, standing. He was getting killed by that Georgia defense. Like they were destroying his line. He was taking sack after sack, and they were not his fault necessarily. He was just getting beat up by like a very quick Georgia pass rush, but he was standing in there and making big plays and kept his team in the game to the very end. He's a frustrating watch, right? Like I think that consistency and or lack thereof is what's keeping him from taking it to the next level. Um, our buddy Rad says he's probably going back to college. I don't think that's been officially announced, but I guess that's sort of the word on the street. Um, and I agree, he probably should go back to college. I mean, if you just quickly, we should probably dive quickly into the data of Quinn Ewers because I think it's actually worth staring at. So I don't know
Yeah.
if you want to put, like you already went to the pressure sack rate and stuff, but I'll mention this: big time throw rate and turnover worthy play rate. Those are two rates that I like to look at. I think they give you an idea. Like big time throws are basically Sunday throws.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you want to think about them. And turnover worthy plays are exactly what they sound like. Like how many plays should have been a turnover or were a turnover, right? You want to see guys like, at least 4, 5, 6% on the big time throw rate in college and like, 1 to 2, 2.5% like turnover worthy play rate. You want that kind of ratio at least. This guy has 3.9% big time throw rate and a 4.2% turnover worthy play rate. I mean, that's it right there, right? He
Yeah.
makes more stupid plays than he makes great plays. And it's not a lack of talent, it's inconsistency in his game. So um I do think he's gonna probably go back to college, is my guess. I think he'll transfer. But again, he's got a great team. He's in the playoff. If he make this is gonna be true for a couple of guys. If he makes a good run here and Texas isn't playing for the national title and he has like a stretch of three, 4 good games in a row, and people say, there it is, that's the Quinn Ewers I was waiting for, because people have that preconceived notion where they're waiting for it to
Mm-hmm.
hit. Um, and if that happens, maybe he hits the NFL draft. I don't know. That's why we have him here. If he goes back to school, you'd like to see him develop these things, but unless he takes a massive leap, I think whether he comes out this year or next year, he's probably going to be a midday pick, a mid draft pick. It's hard for me to see him becoming a first round pick unless he puts it all together next year and has a crazy year. But even then, people are going to have in the back of their mind all these years of struggling. So
Yeah,
the
maybe
number, yeah.
maybe he could do what kind of Bo Nix did and go to Oregon and see if that could revive his career. I don't know. That's the spot I'd be interested in seeing him going, but I don't know. Yeah, it's going to be tough. One thing I want to dive into before we do any of the grades or anything, I went
Mhm.
ahead again this week and I did the third and long stats. So Quinn Ewers, he went 25 for 51. That was a 49% completion percentage, 455 passing yards, 8.92 yards per attempt, 5 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. So, I mean, he had the
Middle of the
most,
pack.
yeah, but he had
Yeah.
the most touchdowns of anybody that we talked about here. But he also had, well, he had the second most interceptions. We'll get into the guy who had the most, but,
Hmm.
um, and then 16 first downs, 31.37. So, as far as conversion rate, that's pretty good. That's right around like what Shador Sanders was at. That's among the higher people, but his passer rating was 80.11, which is that's kind of like where Drew Allar was at, and we had
Right.
some we critiqued him a good bit, despite getting those 5 touchdowns. He had a lot of interceptions, so that would put him behind Shador, behind Cam Ward, behind Jalen Milrow, behind Allar by just a little bit, and then behind two other people we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Can you pull up his passing depth chart? And I'm not going to spend a lot of time dwelling on this, but I just want to show it for everybody because I think this illustrates the Quinn Ewers experience. We talked about the Cam Ward experience last time, which is a good experience. It's just a little bit topsy-turvy in the middle of games. But the Quinn Ewers experience, I'm sorry, did you not have it loaded?
I can get it.
Okay, we'll just show his. I mean, you don't have to if you can't get it up, but
I got it.
there, but yeah. Yeah, the bottom line with Quinn Ewers is, and I'm not going to go through every single segment of the passing depth chart, but it's it's all over the place. Like it's just you look at it, and in every segment, it's haphazard. Like there are places where he's like, you just focus on the intermediate area between the 10 to 20 yards. That's from the yellow line to the white line above it. He has this. Just look at the passer ratings: 75.1 going to the left, 5 of 15 for 83 yards, one touchdown, no interception. Then over the middle, look at this: 27 to 37, 474 yards, two touchdowns, but two interceptions, 110.5 rating. That's great. The same segment of the field, just to the right: 8 of 21, 122 yards, one touchdown, two interceptions, and a 34 passer rating. Like this is Quinn Ewers, right? Like everywhere you look, like there's just inconsistencies in his numbers. It doesn't make sense. If he were to declare, I would probably grade him, Monty, as probably. I would say he's probably. I think he's going to go day two because
Yeah.
of his talent. What do
Hmm.
you think? Would you agree?
I agree. And I would love to take a guy like him day two if I was like, I think somebody mentioned in the chat, like, Chris said, the Rams. I mean, we will say that with every prospect, to be fair, because Rams is
Right.
such a good
Right.
spot. But he reminds me, I didn't have a player comp for him but this is a lofty one, but he's got a little like on the high side of him on the ceiling. He's got a little bit of Matthew Stafford to his game. And, if he could go there, learn under Stafford, learn under McVay, there's a ceiling there. If he gets with the right coach, it's possible. I think he should go back to school, though.
Yeah. Um, my comp in terms of production for Quinn Ewers would probably be honestly a guy like Jameis Winston.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, I see that.
you know, because a prototype, right? A physical prototype of the position, elite arm, right? Jameis has a big arm. Um, productive, but inconsistent, right? Just as many turnovers as big plays, and that's sort of that's what has defined Jameis's career, right? Like he'll have a game where he'll throw for 350 yards and three touchdowns, but he'll also have four interceptions in the same game, right? And he'll lose 31 to 30 or something like that.
Mm.
Like that's kind of the Quinn Ewers thing. So he right now he's in that mold, like. lots of talent, not enough consistency, not enough cutting down on the bad plays. Um, and that's kind of where I put him. We can go through his grade really quickly. I was more harsh on him than you were, and I
Hmm.
apologize, Rocco. I'm sorry. I tried, but these are just a refresher. These are our 10 categories of grading. That there are 12 up there, as you'll see, but there's 10 that we actually put into the cumulative grade that we weigh out. Mechanics, arm strength, accuracy, release, touch, processing, leadership, mobility, resilience, and clutch grade. And we have a Giants and Goon factor that are separate that we don't include in the final score. But mechanics, you gave him a 3, I gave him a 2. This is where I was harsher on him.
Hmm.
Um, I thought his mechanics were all over the place, and it was just inconsistent rep to rep. Um, but I guess you gave him an average grade.
I thought his footwork was pretty good. Like I said, I thought he moved around the pocket well, moved up into the pocket well. I thought he improved from last year. It's not perfect by any means, but I thought it was solid, all things considered.
Arm strength, again, we grade 1 to 5 on these categories. 1 is not an NFL player, 2 is below average NFL player, 3 is an average NFL player for the trait, 4 is above average to borderline Pro Bowl, and 5 is an all pro level skill or talent. Arm strength, we both gave him a 4. He has an above average NFL arm.
Yeah.
Accuracy, we both gave him a 2. He's
One
definitely inaccurate. Yeah.
one thing I want to say too about going into these ratings, like, I think it's a good way for us to do it and not have to do like 4.2, 4.8. Is just putting it into these buckets. But sometimes players get a little bit of a benefit from it because they kind of barely made it over, and some guys kind of get a hit from it by barely making it under. I think Quinn Ewers is the guy who's closer to 5, but he's not quite at that Drake May, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes type arm strength. He's on the high end of the 4, though, in my opinion.
Agreed. Accuracy, 2, below average. Release, this is where we differed the most. You gave him
Yeah.
a 5, I gave him a 3. Tell me why you thought he had a 5 release.
I thought that was the best part of his game, personally. I thought his release was quick, but I think more importantly, I thought the bigger things was I thought he could throw from a variety of arm angles, former baseball player, kind of like Cam Ward, where he can, really, light it up and put it in different spots to get the ball off. I thought he's a guy who had a ton of control over the football based off his release that really allowed him to spin the football and put it in places that other quarterbacks can't place a football. Um, I thought that was the thing that impressed me the most about his game. I thought he had the release of an elite quarterback.
And I can see it again. I just didn't see the consistency with it.
Hmm.
There are too many times where I thought he was slow, but I understand where you see the 5. He has the 5
Hmm.
talent in him. I totally get that. So
Yeah.
I understand. Um, touch, we both give him a 3. He has a decent touch, nothing
Hmm.
elite, but sometimes like where he's except like so where he struggles with touch is some of the deep balls where he'll just miss
Yes.
guys altogether. Where his touch is beautiful when you watch him is over the middle of the field when he layers throws over
He
defenders
layers
and he can
very well.
right. So there is a you can start putting together what he does well, and that's
Hmm.
it's inconsistent again, but there are aspects of strength there.
Hmm.
Processing, I think we both gave him a 2. That makes sense. I mean, he does struggle at times to read defenses, both pre and post snap. He doesn't seem to know where pressure is coming from. He doesn't seem to know where defenders are moving, and he gets caught up. And a lot of times, that's what leads to his checkdowns. Honestly, when I saw him, like he tried to read the defense, and he just wasn't comfortable with what's out there, and he would just go to his check down very quickly.
Yeah,
Um,
and I will say, the one thing I'll give him positive here is, I mentioned it earlier. If he's like going through his reads, he's in the right place, and he sees an opportunity to use anticipatory passing, he's very good at that. But the issue is getting to that part in his progression
right.
and seeing that open. But when it does, he's one of the better guys in the draft of seeing that and throwing it.
You gave him a 4 for leadership. I gave him a 3. I won't argue about that too much.
The one
Mobility.
thing, the one thing I'll say is, his main reason I gave him a 4 is because I felt he improved a lot. I felt like he's a guy who they didn't really rely on the leader, and this year, you've heard a lot about him being a leader, and it's a big reason why they haven't moved on to Arch, despite him being showing more talent, is because he's kind of the leader on that team. So that's why I gave him a 4.
That's fair. You got average mobilities. We both gave him a 3. Resilience. You gave him a 2. I gave him a 3 for the reason you just mentioned. The kid has been bounced. He's been beat up, hurt, and bounced back very nicely every time. Um, he's had some bad game situations where he's bounced back in the second half. So I gave him a little bit of credit there.
I gave him a 2 because, and it was more last year, to be honest with you. It was partially remembering reviewing him last year. I didn't see it on specific games I watched this year, but I remember at times Quinn Ewers, when things get bad, they get worse, they get that worse, worse, and worse. And that happens occasionally. Said more of a 2023 thing, but he's a guy who can allow bad mistakes to stack at times. So that's why I give him a 2.
We both gave him a 3 for clutch. I think it's average. There are some good moments, not some not so good moments. Again, inconsistent. It's a theme. You gave him a 3 just now for the Giants grade,
Yeah,
and I gave
gotcha.
and a 3 for Goo, and I gave him a 2 for the Giants grade and 3 overall. So overall, you gave him a 3.1. I gave him a 2.8. You're a little higher on him.
Hmm.
Um, I view right now, forget the talent. I think Quinn Ewers in the NFL today is a below average NFL starter, probably a bottom third NFL starter at the NFL level if he's asked to start.
And I agree with you. But I think the other thing is why this, it's not perfect necessarily to use our grades to define exactly what it says it is, because he has traits that could translate to him being a better quarterback one day. Well, we're going to go over as like one quarterback comes to mind, and you probably know the one I'm thinking of. Like, he ended up pretty high grade from us, but I don't think he's ever going to be a high end player. He could just probably better today. So, we'll keep moving on, but
Yeah. All right, so that's Quinn Ewers. He was I mean, we'll get to the rankings, but we're kind of averaging out at around like a 4.9 to, I'm sorry, 2.9 to 3 like
mhm.
rate. So, kind of bordering on an average NFL prospect. And that, so that's your first guy. Let's go through. You want to just go in order here, or are we going to go by the
Yeah,
grades?
yeah. Let's just
Let's
keep
go in
going in
order.
order. Yeah.
So these are not, this is not, we're not ranking them six to 10. We're just going to go through the last five QBs, and then we'll tell you how they ranked out at the end
Yep.
based on our scoring. The next guy we're going to go over is a guy who was getting a lot of talk preseason as QB1 coming into the season. This is well timed because our friend Matt just entered the chat. It's no other than Georgia quarterback Carson Beck. 6'4", 220 pounds. He was a four-star recruit. He is a redshirt senior. He's in his fifth year. Um, he had a pretty solid 2023 campaign, though they fell short of the national title. But 2024 has been a different story. His overall numbers are not terrible, but he has had a wild ride getting here. He has a 64% completion percentage rate, 3,485 passing yards, 28 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. He has 145.3 rating, 71 rushing yards, and one rushing touchdown. He did win two national championships sitting behind Stetson Bennett. So let's go through the good of Carson Beck. Uh, Beck has a good arm, like he has a live arm. And he, I wouldn't say it's elite, but he has a strong enough arm with good velocity on the short and intermediate throws, and he will use it and test it to hit tight window throws. He consistently will throw balls into a tight window over the middle of the field on out patterns, and he knows he can get it there. So that's probably one of his better strengths because he can just kind of get it anywhere in the field into a small window. That's his superpower, I would say. Um, and he's very confident doing that. On deep balls and on touch passes in the intermediate area, he has a really nice back shoulder throw. He shows good touch. He layers the ball in there very nicely. So again, good velocity, intermediate area, and tall sides of the field when he has to sling it. And he has nice touch on those back shoulder throws, puts the ball in properly with good accuracy. He's built like an NFL quarterback. He's 6'4", he's 220 with room to grow. He will actually he'll look like an NFL quarterback in terms of frame when he gets to the combine. Um, if he gets to the combine, we'll get to that. His footwork is good. I think largely his mechanics most of the time look pretty solid as he starts to rep. And while he's not a running quarterback per se, I think one of the things we talked about when we did a review of him earlier in the season is that we need to see him use his athleticism to be able to run more this
Hmm.
year. And I think he actually did a decent amount of that in spurts.
Yeah.
He shows you he can do it. In the Alabama game, if you go back and watch that game, there were definitely plays where he took off, where he saw the play break down, took off, and got first downs with his legs. That's all you want, right? You want your quarterback to have the ability to do that, to recognize opportunities to gain with his leg, and to punish defenses when they don't respect his ability to move. He did enough of that. I don't think he's great at it, but he did enough of it. Here, so it sounds like a good quarterback so far. Here are the negatives this year in particular. because he was better at this last year. Um, Very inconsistent processing, like pre and post snap reads. I don't know what he's doing out there sometimes. I thought that he would lock in on throws a lot, and he just had bad reads. Um, I think that his ball placement, while sometimes looks elite and accurate, there are times where inexplicably, he throws the ball in a terrible spot and his accuracy falls apart. It leads to broken plays where his receivers have to break stride and then they have to like come back for the ball.
Hmm.
Destroys it, and it can create turnovers. It has created turnovers, and at minimum it reduces the ability to move the ball and get positive yardage on yak. Um, we'll get to his mechanics stuff, but where his mechanics struggle and everything struggles is with pressure. As he would face pressure, his entire game, including his footwork, his mechanics, his throwing motion, everything would fall apart. Decision making, accuracy. I mean, just he would really become a different player with pressure this year, at least in segments of the season. Um, and as that pocket would collapse, that sound technique and that he's shown on other reps, it just falls apart. And it affected him. Ultimately, I mean, I want to hear your thoughts on him, but to me, this guy, like he looks like if he's going well, like he's a traditional pocket passer who can do a really good job with a little bit of time in the pocket, picking teams apart. He doesn't hold the ball too long. He can make big time throws. He has a lot of ability. Um, and there are aspects of his game that are really admirable and desirable at the NFL level, but his lack of consistency, his pressure, his play under pressure are all significant red flags this year, and they affected him. um, and so I have a lot of question marks about Carson Beck. He was a tough watch because you knew he was better than what you were seeing. But what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, man, I think he nailed it. I'm with you. He's a prototypical like pocket passer. He's got the prototypical frame, and he's got I think he's got a really good arm. It's not quite it's not elite by any means. I think got overrated at times, but I think it's very very good. Um, Certainly has the mentality and the arm talent to like make big time throws, like whether you kind of talk about like tight window passes, back shoulder fades, things like that. He definitely has the ability to make those big time throws in the NFL, and um, he has enough athleticism, just kind of on the lower end. But yeah, it totally fell apart for him this year, man. It's been really bad. And, that's something we talked about going into this year was everyone was talking about this quarterback class, and it's like, oh, we have Beck, we have Shador, we have these guys will get better, and I mentioned like I'm like guys don't always get better. Beck lost a lot of guys. He lost Lad McConkey. He lost Brock Bowers. Like a regression is very much on the table for him, and he wasn't good enough to regress like a guy like Drake May did, like a guy like Caleb Williams did, and still stay a first round pick because he was barely there to start with. And that's exactly what he did. And he regressed bad, really bad. I mean, just looking at here, he had a 91.5 PFF grade in 2023. He had 81.2 this year. He had a 72.2 completion percentage in 2023. Really good. 64.6 this year. So it really fell apart for him in a lot of ways. One thing I wanted to go into a little bit was, again, just these high leverage situations, these third and longs. So if we look at Carson Beck, he went 27 for 52, 51.92 completion percentage. He threw 372 yards, 7.15.4 yards per attempt. Definitely in the lower side of the guys we're talking about here. 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. So he threw more interceptions than he did touchdowns on these. And 17 first downs, 32.69. Again, pretty solid. Like as far as conversion rate, it's very solid. The issue is those were not good stats. That's a 63.94 passer rating. That's the second lowest of the ones we're going to talk about. And that's just because the other one's really, really bad. But this one is bad. He struggled a lot in those situations, and that's a worry. Is high leverage situations, he wasn't great. Um, fourth quarter, he was okay. He went some of that 6.3 police percentage, 810 yards, 7 TDs, 2 interceptions. So in the fourth quarter, he was pretty good this year. A prime example of that was versus Alabama. Really helped them battle out of a hole, even though he kind of put a lot of turnover worthy plays on the table doing it. Just luckily didn't get picked off. But he battled his way out, showed some resilience there. But he's really struggled statistically, even though the
No,
conversion wasn't bad. So
yep.
yeah.
Um, much like, and we'll get. I think we can get to some of the stats now. Like much like Ewers, his depth chart in terms of where he throws the ball, the passing depth chart is it's all over the place. Like it doesn't make a lot of sense when you look at it. You're like, what? How do you have 6 touchdowns, no interceptions, and 130 rating throwing the ball deep over the middle of the field? you know. But when you throw the ball to the right side, you're only 5 of 21 with the 1 touchdown, no interceptions. You have a 71 rating, and you have a third of the production. How do you have how are you 13 of 19 throwing to your right? You struggle throwing to your right deep balls, but in the intermediate area, you're 13 of 19 with 221 yards, 2 touchdowns. You have 142 NFL rating, really good numbers. But you go to the center of the field in the intermediate area, and you're 41 to 69 for 712, but you have 6 interceptions there. Six
Brutal.
interceptions, three
And
touchdowns, and 6 interceptions, and a 72 rating, right? Like just
that's an
terrible. And that's
important spot for the NFL. Like,
this is a big spot, right? Like this is like you're gonna get some picks there. We talked about this with Cam Ward. We talked about how this is an area where Shador could have done a little bit better. I mean, it's a high traffic area. And I think this is where like sometimes immaturity in reading defenses, decision making post snap can affect you. I expect kids to get better to the at the NFL level in this area, but you don't want to see them this disastrously bad,
yes, exactly.
you know. And to the left, it wasn't much better. He had 2 interceptions, 1 touchdown, actually a lower rating. Again, you go all over this chart. Ewers is all over the place. He's too talented to have numbers like that. Just like, I mean, I'm sorry, Ewers, Beck, like Ewers, is too talented to put up this kind of production. And I see Matt in the chart mentioning that there was inconsistency with the Georgia receiving core. And when he started throwing to his tight ends, including Oscar Delp, he performed better towards the end of the year. I think that's true. I think when he found his tight ends, but you know who else was like that? Drew Allard, right? Drew
Mm,
Allard throwing to his tight end was very reliable and good. Drew Allard throwing to his wide receivers was awful. And I think that Beck is a guy he should be better than this. And he wasn't, and I don't know why. He's a little bit of a strange dude also.
yeah,
Like in interviews, he's a little out there. So I don't know what's going on in his head. Um, but I think there's nobody who fell harder in terms of their draft stock from the QB class than Beck this year. And that's because he was kind of viewed as QB1 by a lot of people coming into the year, and certainly like a top 10, top 20 pick. And now he's looking at I don't know what, if he does declare. I mean, I would kind of like Ewers. I could see him definitely going day two. I can see somebody saying, I'm taking a swing on this kid because he's talented, but I can see him falling to day three too because he was bad.
he's coming off injury. You got
And
injured.
that's the other
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
He tore his UCL in the game against Texas, which is, the same ligament that gets involved in multi-ligament tears that lead to Tommy John surgery. Not as much of an issue for football players and quarterbacks as it is for baseball pitchers, but it's still an issue. So Um, I do think he's going to come back to college also, but we haven't heard that definitively yet. So unless we do, we're going to talk about him. So
I
we
think he
could
should.
go into his grades. Yeah, let's go into his grades real quick. Um, and this is not pretty. Um, Mechanics, we both gave him a 3. I wanted to give him a higher, but I saw his mechanics fall apart under pressure so many times I couldn't.
That's
If
exactly
it,
why I didn't give him higher.
yeah. Otherwise, I mean, when he has a clean pocket, he has some of the best mechanics in the class. He really does.
Agreed.
Very good footwork, snappy delivery, clean, repetitive motion that, with a quick release, like all of that is good. Um, but pressure blows it apart. Arm strength, you gave him a 4. I gave him a 3. But I could have given him a 4. I think he has a good arm. I'm not going to argue that too much. Accuracy, we both gave him a 3. Again, very inconsistent accuracy. Clean pocket. like elite accuracy at times. Not a clean pocket, borderline unplayable accuracy. And
Mhm.
it was something you saw a lot. Maybe it is who he's throwing to, but we saw a lot of problems there. Release, you gave him a three. I gave him a four. I thought it was a quick release. Not a lot of wasted motion. Did you see anything different there?
I just thought it was. I didn't think it was bad. I just thought it was pretty standard. I didn't think there was anything special about it.
Fair enough. You gave him a three for touch. I gave him a two. I wanted to give him higher, but again, some of his throws especially to the sideline, they just like receivers open, the ball's just flying like 10 yards out of bounds. I saw too many throws like that. And I'm like, what happened to this guy? Um, so I gave him a little bit lower than you. Processing, we both gave him a two. Like I was shocked at how bad he was processing this year. Like he just
Mhm.
struggled to read defenses and make decisions and struggled to throw with anticipation with consistency. Leadership, we both gave him a two. I don't want to get into it too much, but he's a strange guy.
Yeah.
Um, Mobility, you gave him a two. I gave him a three. I thought he showed enough with his legs. Like I said, in the Alabama game and some other places where he was able to move, but it's not a facet of his game that he uses regularly.
Yeah, I think he's somewhere between a two and a three. I think ultimately at the NFL level, he would be a below average quarterback from an athleticism standpoint, but I do think he's better than some of the other guys we'll talk about.
You gave him a resiliency score of four. I gave him a three. I'm guessing you gave him that because he had so many comebacks.
It was the Alabama game. The Alabama
Yeah.
game is why I gave it to him. The way that he fought back and they came back, and I know they ended up losing that game, but he just did not care, was just winging that thing, didn't lose any confidence. That's why I gave him a four.
I gave him a three for clutch because of the Alabama game, because of the second half. You gave him a two. I don't blame you.
I gave
Uh,
him a two. Some of the stats we talked about in those high leverage situation.
Fair enough. You gave him a three for the Giants grade. I gave him a two. I don't think the Giants are in a position to take a guy with this many question marks, but
I
but the talent is real.
I think I gave him a three because I don't necessarily view him as a developmental prospect. I think he's a guy who you need to fix, but like it's. I think that he's a guy you could potentially start year one at some point. Hopefully, if he's ever going to be successful, I don't think he's a guy who needs to sit for a lot of time. So that's kind of why I justified doing the three.
Brad has a good point. His resilience score has to go because he keeps shooting a shot on Snapchat.
It's true.
He's
Facts.
isn't he dating one of those twins?
The Cavalier twins, yeah.
Yeah, so that's got to be worth something. Um, Goon Factor, we both gave him a two. So we both came out with a cumulative score
Well,
of 2.8.
Matt said there's no goon factor in Carson Beck's DNA, so maybe should have gave him a zero.
Matt's a Georgia guy. He was disappointed, but hey, listen, they won the SEC at the end of it, right? Congratulations, the dogs. Um, and Carson Beck, I guess he's not playing. In this, I understand he may not. He's probably not going to play, but you guys are there, so congrats. Um, Overall grades, we both gave him a 2.8. He's a
Hmm.
below average NFL quarterback right now, with the talent to be better, right? And I think that my comp for him coming into the season was Jared Goff. Um, and I think it's actually ringing pretty true right now, although
Hmm.
his risk score is a five. Man, I don't know about that. But but his the Jared Goff comp, I think, is a good one. We thought that seeing the best of him, right? We're like, hey,
Yeah.
this guy's pretty good. If he's got a clean pocket, he can really torch teams. He's very solid. And then we see the worst of him without a clean pocket. So he's not quite Jared Goff because Jared Goff is a little better at navigating a bad pocket. Not a ton better, but a little bit better than this guy. Um, but I think the comp is pretty true, right? He's the kind of guy like the way he succeeds in the NFL. He needs a wall in front of him, he needs
Hmm.
a really solid O-line because you start pressuring the guy and his game starts to fall apart. But if you don't pressure him, he can produce at an extraordinarily high level. Fascinating prospect in that sense, right?
Yeah.
Probably going back to school, but yeah, that's the comp. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we said it in our all 22 review this summer. I think it's a high end comp for him, but
Hmm.
it's a comp at the end of the day.
Yeah, comps tend to be high end, right? You don't
Hmm.
comp them to shit.
More more
So
fun.
yeah, exactly. So Carson Beck. All right, you want to do the next guy?
Yeah, so we'll go into the next one. This one was definitely one that interested me. So let me pull him up and okay. So I will share the screen. Okay.
More intriguing than I thought he would be
I
going
to-
into it.
I agree. This was one of the last guys we decided to put on here, and you know,
He's pretty good.
yeah, Cade Klubnik out of Clemson. 6'2", 210 pounds. He was a 5-star recruit. A lot of people had him as the number one recruit in the class. 247 had him, I believe, behind Drew Allar. He's a junior, and he's a true junior in his third year. This year he has a 63.7 completion percentage, 3,303 passing yards, 33 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 7.5 yards per attempt, 148.6 rating, 458 rushing yards, and 7 rushing touchdowns. He was a true dual threat for them this year. Um, give a little background on him to some more stuff. He was the Elite 11 MVP. So if anybody, follows recruiting college football, Elite 11s, like the biggest competition for high school quarterbacks, he won the MVP. And he also became the first quarterback to go undefeated as a starter and winning back-to-back state titles in Texas' highest classification since Kyler Murray, arguably the greatest high school Texas quarterback ever. So let's get into it. Let's talk about him because, this is a guy who was kind of seen as a bust, a disappointment. He was supposed to be another one of these great Clemson quarterbacks. You saw Sean Watson, you saw Trevor Lawrence. It's supposed to be
You saw it with
DJ.
DJ
Yeah,
Ugalele.
it's supposed to be DJ Ugalele. Wasn't him. It was supposed to be Cade Klubnik. And for a while, it wasn't him. But he's had a good year. You can see by those stats. And, let's get in some of the positives. He has a really good arm. It's again not elite, but I think as good as strong as basically anybody we talked about here. Maybe a little weaker in like a Quinn Ewers, maybe a little weaker in a Drew Allar, but it's right up there with a lot of these guys, and he can make throws at every level. Really, really good athlete. One of the best athletes we've talked about here. He's effective as a scrambler and improviser, extending plays with his legs, finding opportunities downfield. He's a guy who performed really well under pressure this year, which was something he struggled with in years past. And I think that's a big thing where you saw his jump in his success this year, because that was a big negative for him in years past. And you look right here at his pressure grade, 78.6, and that showed up on tape. He made throws without, getting smashed with pressure in his face. He did a good job. I thought he was a good touch passer. I thought he displayed the ability to throw a touch when required, dropping balls into tight spots. I thought he had a really quick release to get the ball out of his hands. Again, just, I think a mix between that arm strength, that quick release, and then he has that mentality to really test those tight windows. And he's a guy who's a really good tight window passer. It's something I liked from JJ last year. He had all three of those. Reminds me a little bit of that in that sense. He's good at tight windows, and then he's good off platform throws. I thought he was comfortable throwing off platform, maintaining accuracy and velocity. Even when his mechanics weren't perfect. But let's get into some of the negatives. He lacks anticipation. He doesn't throw enough anticipation. I can see him be late to a lot of these, and timing routes aren't necessarily his bread and butter, especially more in like the intermediate to deep area. I can see him get stuck in his progressions. He gets stuck in initial reads, and he needs to really work through those better. It's a lot of processing issues, which is important for a quarterback, clearly. And then some inconsistency with his decision making, his willingness to challenge tight windows sometimes lead to unnecessary risk when I watch to him. Overall, man, like I didn't have a ton of cons for him. I thought it was processing, and processing really needs work. And that's a big thing for a quarterback. So it really showed up with him like getting there. But there's a lot about this guy's game that I like. He's no secret first round pick or anything like that, but this is a guy who, I think will go back to school. I think should go back to school. And I'm a lot more excited about going into next year than a guy like Drew Aller for me personally. I don't know how you feel, but he's a guy who really excites me. And I think if he can, start to improve his processing with more playing time, I think this he could start to really, build up his stock that he had coming out of high school. So give me your thoughts, Sal.
I liked it. Yeah, I see some good comments here. K-Max says I need a shower after this episode, and like D Kid is miserable, and Brad has a good comment. Skills and traits are there. Processing is the easiest thing to teach. Um, yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. I like Cade Klubnik. I mean, we're grading on the curve of the rest of the quarterbacks, right? So we're talking about guys who we don't anticipate viewing through the lens of would we take them in the first round? No, I wouldn't take Cade Klubnik in the first round.
No.
But like you said, he came in as a highly touted prospect and out of high school, and he struggled early, but he has the physical traits to be successful in the NFL. He can run. He runs with power. He's not like this extremely elusive runner, but he's got a little bit of movement skills. I mean, there's one run that he broke off for like I forgot, it was like 55 yards for a touchdown.
Yep.
With his legs. I forgot
NC
who that was
State, I
against.
think.
Yeah. He has a live arm. Like he can make every throw on the field. And some of his deep touch passes are very impressive. Like I was shocked with the ball placement on some of these things. Like they were
Hmm.
like some beautiful deep passes that it was just dropping the bucket of a receiver as he's 50 yards away. So I was impressed by his accuracy. I was impressed by his touch passes. I was impressed by the ability to stretch and challenge every segment of the field. Um, and I was impressed that he's got athleticism. I'm like, what am I missing here? It's a good quarterback. Here's where you kind of like you nailed it, where he struggles. He's a he's a guy that's got to see a player get open before
Hmm.
he's gonna launch that ball, right? And that's the kind of thing where it's easier to do in college because you might have your receiver completely outclassing the guy on the other side, and he's going to get easy separation, and then you see him open, and then you can throw the ball. Yes, he has the physical ability to make every one of those throws when the receiver's open. He doesn't do a lot of throwing guys open. He doesn't throw into tight windows a ton, right? He's not trying to challenge, you know, before a guy is clearly open. He doesn't have a lot of anticipation, just not consistently. So I think there's a lot to be desired there. The cerebral part of the NFL game, that instinctive throw, even, where a guy's going to be, if you're even, you're leaving, get that ball out. He
Hmm.
doesn't do that enough. And I feel like he has to see people open. He has to see separation for a few feet before he goes there. I mean, my player comp for him is going to be, I'm saying nice things, but my player comp for him is actually Daniel Jones.
I think it's a good
Um,
comp. Hmm.
and so, I mean, physically strong kid, good, not great arm, but a good arm. Can have a nice deep ball, right? When the guys
Hmm.
are open, doesn't challenge tight windows very often, and doesn't sense players being open with anticipation. Um, and he's a good runner, good straight line runner. Um, yeah, I mean, I agree. He's probably he's better than Daniel Jones. I'm not saying he's Daniel Jones exactly. He's a better prospect than him. He was a better high school prospect. I'm
Very
not,
improviser.
yeah, he's the better version of Daniel Jones. How about that, right? But I think the weaknesses are very similar to Daniel Jones,
Agreed.
and they may hold him back if he doesn't develop. Now he's young, so he has time to improve on those things. You see kids in college find success early with their raw physical traits, and then the cerebral aspect of it, the instinctive aspects of it, throwing with anticipation, reading defenses better, just processing better, they pick up, right? The brain is developing in these young men, and they process faster and faster and faster till about the age of about 25. That's getting into neuroscience, but the human brain generally is learning how to process and do rapid decision making in the frontal part of your brain, and it's developing it and getting better if you train it until about the age of 25. After about 25, you know, you not sink, but you stabilize. It's hard to make it better. So you can see a young player like Klubnik improving in that area. He definitely has the raw tools. But today, he's not showing me that, right? So he's another one that I think this guy has no business declaring for the NFL draft,
Hmm.
because I actually feel like one more year in college, whether it's at Clemson or otherwise, if he really works on his game and focuses on things to improve his processing, like, oh, I don't know, the virtual reality headset,
Not to say
things
the
like
same thing.
that,
Get it on that
right?
man.
Get him right. He's got a chance.
He's
This
the
guy has
perfect
a
guy
chance
for
to be
that.
something good.
He's
Right.
young. He's
If
young. Like
he's young, he has the physical tools, and if he does that and he becomes a better processor, this is someone who's going to shoot up the draft boards. Shoot up the draft boards because his production and his game and his tape is going to completely change in a really positive way. So I'm kind of excited about his potential if he goes back to school and does the right thing and makes the most of that time.
I
So
agree.
that's kind of my take on him. We can get into his charts and his grades if you want to.
Well, yeah,
You
two things I want to touch on before we get there. One, I wanted to say, I the thing that I think he's really improved on in the last year, and I also think is a big difference between him and Daniel Jones. You can look at that pressure grade, and you look at that pressure to sack rate. I mean, those are both
Yep.
two things that were really bad for him year past. I mean, you look at these grades 64.4, 68.6 to 87.9. Like, I think there's a bad taste in a lot of college football fans' mouths with Cade Klubnik because of who they expected him to be and who he was over his first year and a half of college football. And he's not suddenly like turned into a whole new guy and a first round pick or anything like that. But he took a legitimate step, and I think that should be recognized. The one other thing I wanted to touch on was high leverage situations. And again, this is something Cade Klubnik was pretty impressive in. So he went 35 for 53. That's a 66.04 completion percentage. That is the best out of anybody that we're reviewing. Very good completion percentage. 473 yards, 8.925 yards per attempt, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, 21 first downs, which is a 39.62, which is second of anybody we talk about for that conversion rate, and a 105.1 passer rating, which is second for anybody we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about another guy very soon who has some crazy numbers here. That's the only reason he's second in a lot of these, but really, really impressive in a high leverage situation, which is another point, another thing keep an eye on for a guy like this.
Yeah. Again, just more evidence. There's something here, right?
Yes.
This one, there's something here. Let's go through his passing chart
Yep.
and then we'll go into his grades real quick. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but we've already kind of given you our gist of this guy. Um, his passing chart, it looks better than the last two guys. Let's summarize it that way. There seems to be an issue throwing to the right. And I saw that on tape. Like there were more missed throws to the right. I'm not sure why that is. That feels to me like a mechanics issue, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like a footwork issue. And if you watch, I know DKit watches them, but for those who don't know, like QB School has some great videos breaking down QB play, both at the college and the NFL level. Um, JT O'Sullivan does it. He's outstanding. Learn a lot about QB play when you watch it and what he looks for. And one of the things that he points out frequently, and it's shocking how often it's a problem, is where your feet are pointed when you're throwing the ball, right? And I've learned to watch for that, right? It seems so intuitive, but it's not something you always notice when you're watching things.
Yeah.
And when I see inaccuracy to one side of the field, I kind of then go back and say, what was their footwork like? You got to revert, you rewind, and you see, and he was more inaccurate throwing to his right. When you watch his footwork, he often throws kind of flat-footed to his right. Like he doesn't stride into it properly and lean in with a proper angle. He's much more naturally able to do that throwing to his left. So it's the kind of thing where QB coaching and just footwork drills and things like that, I think could help him. Um, but it's the one thing that stands out. That's where these like little passing depth charts give you a little bit of data that you can dig into and say, does that confirm what I saw? Yes, it did. And then you look into like things like footwork and strides and stuff like that. But I did notice the throwing to the right thing. But overall, I mean, it's pretty good, right? Like it's a
Yeah.
solid looking depth chart, a solid looking chart overall. I'm nitpicking a little bit, but just because there's one side that looks a little bit skewed, but he has really good grades everywhere.
And you know
A
what?
lot of good production.
Sometimes it's a good thing to kind of like be able to like point to it. It's like, okay, he has trouble here, and we can work on this instead of like he has trouble here, 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 and here. Like
Right, exactly. Right. It was similar to JJ throwing to his left last year,
exactly.
right? And when you
And
and
he's
you
a young
saw
guy.
JJ doing it, right? And JJ, it was very obvious why JJ would struggle throwing to his left. He would overstride. He would
Hmm.
overstride to his left, and then he would fire off a piss missile. You
Yeah.
know, and it was and he worked on it. You saw that at the combine, he made it a point to like throw to his left, throw to his left. You saw in preseason before he got hurt, he was throwing gorgeous deep passes to his left, throwing with precision to his left. So it's something that like these young players can work on this stuff if you identify a specific issue. So that was the only thing that stood out in a negative way. Otherwise, I thought he was pretty good. Um,
Yeah.
our grades. So Klubnik graded out pretty damn good. Like
Yep.
he wasn't the highest graded player from this group, believe it or not, for either one of us, but he was
Somehow.
solid. Yeah, mechanics, he, three, solid, right?
Hmm.
With room to improve.
Yep.
Arm strength, four, above average NFL arm. Accuracy, three, solid, but with room to improve. Release, four, quick release.
Yep.
Nice, smooth mechanics. Ball's out fast, whips it
And
nicely.
can work off platform with it and things along those lines.
The only place you and I differed was you gave him a four for touch. I gave him a three, and I gave him a three only because sometimes I saw those throws to the right where the ball floated,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
and I think that could be a four. Processing, we said that's where he struggles. He gets a two, but he's young, but he has to improve that because that's not he doesn't have he's not an NFL level processor yet. Leadership, I didn't see any problems. Looked into his history. I found no red flags, nothing.
Same
So I
here.
gave him an average of a three. Mobility, he's definitely a four. He's above average as an athlete running and using his legs. He is a
Yep.
threat with his legs. Resilience, I gave him, I thought he was average. He was pretty solid through the year. Hell, they won the ACC when it came down to it, right?
Hmm.
Um, they beat D-Kit's team. Sorry, D-Kit. Clutch gave him a three. Giants grade, I gave him a three. I think, if he came out, if he declared, he needs time to develop, but I would take a swing on a talent like this. Why
Yeah.
not? If you're gonna take somebody late, and a goon factor for three. So overall, I gave him a 3.2. You gave him a 3.3. But we
Yeah.
basically have him graded as like, yeah, I think DK's right. I think you graded him higher than Dart. I think we did actually grade him higher than Dart. I went back and looked at it, and there's one other guy who might grade out a little higher than Dart, but yeah, whatever. It's not perfect, but I think that I was more impressed than I thought I would be when I really looked into this guy. When we did the deeper dive into this guy, I was impressed. So overall, I thought he's got a chance. He's like right now, if he comes
Yeah.
out, I would take a swing on him in the mid rounds. But if he goes back to school, I think he has a chance to be a lot better. But right now, he's like high end Daniel Jones.
Yeah. And I'll even say like I kind of agree with you. Although I did like his touch, four is probably a little bit generous. Although like did think it was a strength of this. The one thing I could have done, but I probably would have kept to 3.3. Is I probably could have knocked up his clutch because I didn't really dig into the stats until after. I kind of didn't go back with his, but he had some really, really, really impressive high leverage situation we're going to talk about. Let me look, and before we move on, I have his fourth quarter. Let's see what some of those look like. So fourth quarter isn't quite as impressive as that. He was 45 for 82 in the fourth quarter, so 54.9 completion percentage. Not great. 434 yards, four touchdowns, two interceptions, 110.56 rating. So like nothing that special there, but it's fine. So 3-4.
Again, like no red flags. I think that's the thing
Yeah.
with Club. All of these guys we're discussing have some pretty significant red flags on their tape. There was no major red flag with Klubnik. Clearly, his processing needs work, right? But again, he's young and there's room to improve there. And a lot of young players struggle with it, and you're like, this guy's not good. And then they finally, in their fourth or their fifth year in college, they put it together, right? And then you're like, oh shit, that's a first round talent. He
Hmm.
has that kind of upside. I'm not saying he's going to be a first rounder, but if he puts those things together, they're not gonna ignore the fact that he was one of the top recruits in the country and that he has the physical strengths that he has. He's one to keep an eye on if he goes back, and I'm assuming he's going back to school, but he's another one. He's in the playoff. You don't know what will happen. I don't think Clemson's going anywhere, but you never know. If he puts on a show, he may raise some eyebrows. But I still think he's much more likely to go back to school than some of the other guys. Like I think he's going back to learn and build up his draft stock. So now I don't know if he's going to go back to Clemson. I'm not sure if that's. I guess he hasn't decided that yet. But one to watch. Um, let's see. Next guy. Um,
It's the guy that I wanted to make sure that we reviewed because he had some really impressive PF numbers. Someone you were
all
you
right.
were pretty impressed about. So why don't you
Right.
get
So
into it?
our next, so I'll tell you right now, the next guy that I'm going over ended up being our highest rated player from this group for both of us. And I was shocked that he ended up being our highest rated player.
I,
And
I
you
like
you will be too.
Yeah, I like even like I don't even think like I liked him as much when I saw him, but then I did the grades. I'm like, oh shit, you know high. So yeah, go ahead.
I mean, so the next player is no other than Curtis Kurt Curtis Rourke from Indiana. Curtis Rourke, the brother of Nathan Rourke. 6'5", 223 pounds. He was a three-star recruit out of Canada. He's a redshirt senior. He's actually a six-year senior. He was the MAC MVP in 2022, Offensive Player of the Year in the MAC in 2022. The story is interesting. He couldn't get scholarships coming out of Canada, even though he was the number one prospect in Canada at quarterback. Ohio took him because his brother played there, and his brother got Ohio to not Ohio State, not Miami of Ohio, Ohio. Right?
Hmm.
They took him, and so he spent years there and basically worked his way up, and then he got a shot, and he goes to Indiana. um, Indiana recently hired Kirk Cignetti as their head coach from James Madison. And as you guys know, Indiana had a freaking ridiculous year and they're in the college football playoff. Curtis Rourke was a big part of that, a huge part of that. So let's talk about Curtis Rourke because
Yeah.
I was absolutely stunned when I was watching him. I mean, I knew he was decent this year, but I couldn't believe what I was watching. So this guy, so again, his size, 6'5", 223, probably will play around 230. He's a physical specimen. He's a big dude. So he's not like a
Prototype.
small person, prototype size. His game, I mean, it's a timing offense game,
Hmm.
but it's when it's in rhythm, it's one of the nicest games you're going to see from anybody in the class. Nice back shoulder fades, good touch and timing, very good on timing routes. The ball gets there on time, in stride, catchable ball. Remember, Bill Walsh talked about throwing a catchable ball. This guy throws a really nice catchable ball to his receivers in stride in their hands. It falls softly in their hands. He puts the ball exactly where it needs to go to maximize yak. That's his biggest strength. He puts it his precision in ball placement for yak purposes is excellent.
Hmm.
Um, he's experienced. So he knows. Unlike Cade Klubnik, he's kind of like the opposite of Klubnik, right? Klubnik is a raw talent who needs to learn how to process defenses. This guy's experienced. He has less talent, less raw talent than Kublik, but he's a very good processor. He reads defenses very well pre-snap. He knows exactly what he's looking at. He goes to the right reads and he maximizes pretty much every play. Like he maximizes what he's going to get out of every play, given his physical limitations. He's a smart player. Um, and honestly, he looks like a perfect West Coast offense quarterback. Put him in,
Yep.
he can timing offense, right? He has zone beaters built into his brain, right?
Hmm.
Like built into his brain. I see this, I see cover three. Here's where I'm going with the ball, and here's where I'm placing it to this guy right in stride. He's just the guy's like a machine on these timing based plays. And that's where he fits in a West Coast system. Here's where he's not great. For all the things that I said that were good about him, it's not like he throws a rocket.
Yeah.
It's a soft pass, right? Doesn't have great velocity. He has good velocity. I don't think he has bad velocity, but he has. It's not like he's
Depends where
throwing
he's
these.
throwing it.
Right. He's not throwing these tight window missiles, right? That just get
Hmm.
in there and beat like a closing safety. Um, but he does make up for it though with the timing. Like he does
Hmm.
some. The ball just gets there, right? I'll put it that way. Like, the ball gets there, but it's not like with a great arm. Um, when he's throwing outside the numbers and when he's throwing a deeper ball or when he's throwing off platform, his accuracy and all of this timing stuff falls apart. Like he
Hmm.
struggles. So he has to be in rhythm. He's not a good athlete. You sent a nice little picture to me of, what you thought depicted him,
Yeah,
stuck in water. Um,
yeah, cement feet.
I cement feet. I sent you another picture, which was he reminded me of Han Solo, frozen in carbonite. Like 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 he's stuck in this pose, and
Mhm.
he doesn't move, man. His feet are very Tanner McKee like, if DK's favorite quarterback. So he's not a very good athlete. He's stuck in the ground. He doesn't have a massive arm. He's not great with pressure. Yeah, and I think his problems have a lot to do with just his lack of athleticism. I mean, those are the negatives. Like if he was a better athlete and could move better, I think
Mhm.
a lot of these we'd be talking about a higher rated prospect. But look, at the end of the day, smart quarterback, experienced, has good size, good arm, not a great arm, doesn't have like a piss missile, but he has good enough arm, very good timing offense, very good processing, intelligent, cerebral, pinpoint accuracy, hits guys in strides, throws a catchable ball, perfect for a West Coast system with limitations where he's not going to do much with his legs. Um, he's probably a day three guy, but he is a Tanner McKee like without it. Yes, he doesn't have the rocket that Tanner
No.
McKee has, but I'm just talking about his legs. His legs are like Tanner McKee's. Um, but honestly, I thought a decent comp for him was, and we talked about it, was like Kirk Cousins,
Mhm.
you know? Like Kirk Cousins is that guy, right? He doesn't have an elite arm, but he has a good arm and he's very good in timing. He places the ball nicely, hits guys in stride, doesn't have really much mobility at all, but when he's in his rhythm, he can be very productive and effective. And I kind of think that's what he is. But what were your thoughts on Rourke?
Yeah, so I'll give you some of my thoughts, and I'll say I another comp I came up with today actually after watching him was he reminded me a little bit of Jimmy Garoppolo, like as far as his strengths and weaknesses to what his physical limitations are, and a guy who was very kind of advanced coming into the league, and a guy who operated that West Coast offense very well. More of that traditional NFL size. I thought that was a decent comp for him as well, but yeah, I liked Kurtis Rourke. He didn't wow me by any means, but he was just consistently a good quarterback. He's a very cerebral quarterback. Like you said, his strengths kind of lie in his timing and accuracy and ball placement. He really thrived in that short to intermediate passing game, particularly like between the hashes. And where his pre-snap processing allowed him to execute this timing routes and allow him to consistently move the chains. That's something you consistently saw from him. Um,
Sorry.
no,
Matt's
good.
comment. So to put that up there, Curtis Rourke sounds like a future McVay coaching tree offensive coordinator in
he,
like 8
he
years.
does. He absolutely does.
Curtis Rourke's comp is Liam Cohen at UMass. So, that's a good comp. I'm sorry. Go on.
You're good. Um, his ball placement enables receivers, like you said, he enables receivers to gain yards after the catch. Really, all that makes him a really natural fit for a West Coast offense that prioritizes that quick decision and precision. So that's something is really well, and I think it's really obvious that that's a good fit for him. And not only is it a good fit for him, like I don't know if he can have success in a different type of offense. You really have to play to his strength because he's a limited quarterback. He's not scheme versatile. Something where luckily his strengths play really well to a really popular offense in the NFL. So that's a positive for him. So let's go on some of the negatives. I know you said it, a lot of them, but I said his physical limitations kind of cap who he is. I thought his arm strength was below average, and we mentioned this is actually fades when he's targeting outside numbers and on deep throws. He struggles with pressure, and I felt like he really had struggles sensing pressure in the pocket, and like I said, like looked like at times where he'll just set his feet. He'll drop back in the pocket. He'll set his feet, won't move them. Sometimes he'll get a pass off. Sometimes he'll get sacks. Not every time, but he'll just absolutely stand there flat-footed, middle of the pocket. Not a great thing to see.
takes a
And
takes a lot of sacks.
yeah, 25.4 pressure to sack rate is not great to see, especially with a good average time to throw, 2.56. So like,
And
um,
this is the thing. Like a pressure is a sack with Curtis Rourke. That's the thing.
mhm.
Like if you get pressure on him, if the pressure gets there before the ball's out, he's going down. Like that's just how it is.
Yeah, and we're gonna get into our grades later, and I think we both grade him high in processing. But you could potentially knock him for processing if you talk about kind of his pocket presence and dealing with part of that's athletically he's limited. You could blame you can blame it on a few things. You blame some of the processing, you can blame it on his athleticism, you can blame it on some of just his footwork. His footwork is not good enough to move around the pocket. So it's a little bit from all there, and that is all kind of combines in the perfect combination to really make him a guy who struggles. So, but again, you look at a guy like Tua Tagovailoa, and he never gets sacked because they get that ball out of his hands instantly. So you get him in the right offense, it might not be as much of a problem. But finally, he's really a smart dude in his accuracy. There's a reliable distributor in the right system. It's just the sacks and his inability to kind of push the ball downfield and outside the numbers. And that's my worry about him actually being a long-term star in the NFL. Despite really do like him for the right system, but I could see him being a total dud as well. It's tough. He's very limited.
Good but limited is really the way to describe him. Let's quickly go to his passing depth, and we'll go into the grades because he grades out better than he honestly grades better than he is. But we'll talk about that.
Mm,
But like I mean, but when you look at his passing, when you look at the passing depth, the chart, it's really good. It's actually great when you look at how he rates out. I mean, he does well against pressure. He does well in every part of the field. Um, the only part of the field where he, quote, struggled a little bit is the deep center, where he was 4 of 14 for 161 with 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions and had a 75 NFL passer rating. That was his lowest grade.
mhm.
Everything else is over 100. Everything else is over 100, which is really, you don't see that for everybody, like really good scores. 3 touchdowns throwing deep, no interceptions to his left. 2 touchdowns, no interceptions throwing deep to his right. These are both high ratings, 142 and 138 respectively. 149 intermediate left, 128 intermediate right, 141 intermediate center. Cumulatively 13 touchdowns and 1 interception in the intermediate area. And then in the short area, 119, 108, 108 going left to right. Um, Cumulatively 6 touchdowns, 1 interception. I mean, the guy's he's just good everywhere on the field. He struggles throwing deep. He struggles, especially throwing deep middle of the field. And we talked about his limited arm.
Mhm.
But again, he's a smart quarterback. He's just limited. We can go into his grades real quick.
What real
Um,
quick before we go into his grades,
oh, you're
I
the
I
the
told
clutch.
you
Yeah.
about him, but I never actually gave you the numbers. So let me tell you how impressive this guy is in these high leverage situations. Kurtis Rourke, he was 25 for 38, 65.79 completion percentage, 373 yards, was 9.816 yards per attempt. That was number one out of all
Wow.
these quarterbacks. He 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, solid. He had 20 first downs, which gave him a 52.63 conversion percentage on his third and longs, and he had 115.35 passer rating for third and long. The next highest was Shador Sanders with 97.51.
Crazy. I'm telling you, like the data loves him. And
Mm-hmm.
his film is solid. It's just what you're watching. You're watching
Yeah.
a very good but limited quarterback who I think against bad teams and lesser competition is going to tear them apart. When he faces the better defenses, his lack of athleticism, his movement skills, it's going to hurt him.
Oh,
But we're going to get into that.
one
Yeah.
more thing too. His fourth quarter stats. I'll get in those. These ones actually are really impressive. 25 for 42, so 59.5 completion percentage. That's not crazy, but 347 yards on those 25 completions for 6 touchdowns, 0 incompletions for 176.06 completion percentage in the fourth or quarterback rating in the fourth quarter.
Crazy.
Pretty damn impressive. You're really impressed, and it's a reason Indiana was so successful this year. He had a lot of success in those big moments, and that's how you win football games.
Yeah, let's pull up his grades. And like I said, he graded out better than everybody else in this batch. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so mechanics, you gave him a 3, I gave him a 4. Um, we're probably splitting hairs here, but needless to say, solid mechanics, right?
Yeah, his
Solid,
his
maybe.
footwork could be a little bit better, from like navigating the pocket and stuff like that. That's the only reason I kind of knocked him down a little bit.
You were harsh on his arm. You gave him a 2. I gave him a 3. I he can make every throw. He's just slow getting there.
I disagree. I don't think he could I don't think he could be an NFL quarterback in every single system. I think he's only going to succeed in a West Coast offense.
So yeah, but I mean, I think that's such a proliferative offense. It's such a common offense now. I mean, we can argue about it later,
Sure, but
but
like
I'm
I
not
would
gonna.
have gave Bo
Yeah,
Nix a 2 as well, like for example.
fair enough. Accuracy, 3. We both agree. He's solidly accurate. Could have given him a higher grade here, honestly, but but I think this is a safe grade for him. Release 3, nothing special, nothing bad. I didn't see any problems with it. I don't think he has a ton of arm angles, um,
Hmm.
but I
Yeah.
think he's got a quick release.
Yep.
Um,
Standard. Standard good.
touch touch is one of his better areas of his game. He layers the ball beautifully over
Hmm.
the middle of the field. He has nice back shoulder throws, so we both gave him a 4. We both gave him a 4 for processing. He's above average there. We talked about that. You gave him a 4 on leadership. I gave him a 3. I probably could have given him a 4 here, but not a big difference. Mobility 2, bordering on 0 for both of us. He does not move. Resilience 4, and then clutch. I gave him a 4. You gave him a 5, but I can see why you gave him a 5 with the
I
numbers
knocked
you
it up.
just shared.
Yeah.
Yep. Goon grade 2, and a goon factor 3. Overall, we both came out with a score of 3.4. So he is the highest graded player in this batch. Actually, graded higher than both Jackson Dart and Drew Aller.
Yep. Yeah, he would be quarterback 4 right now.
Um,
In
here's
the
the
right
bottom line with
system,
Rourke.
I think that's fair.
Right. Bottom line with Rourke. He's going to get drafted, I think.
Mhm.
He's a day 3 guy. He's not.
Yep.
I don't think he's a day 2 guy.
No.
But this guy is like the perfect backup quarterback.
Hmm.
Like you want a guy who understands defenses, who if you're in not for everybody, but if you're in a West Coast offense that can work with a timing based offense, yeah, we know Dart is better than Work. We're just saying based on the grading system, he
Hmm.
ended up better. We understand his limitations,
Yeah.
but in a timing based offense, this is a guy who, like, if he's a solid backup, right? You can put him back there and say, my team doesn't have to fall apart if I have Kurtis Rourke on my team. He's limited, but he can move the ball, right? He's the kind of guy that can come in and, like, he can score points for you. You just have to make sure that you have the right kind of environment around him. He's going to be very scheme and situation limited, but if he's in the right situation, he can be very productive.
I'll also
Is he
say
Purdy 2.0? No, he's not as mobile as Purdy.
no, Purdy's women, but he could be the Purdy of this draft in some sense. Like the guy who succeeds early on with a lot of experience and goes to the right offense. He's not the player comp isn't the same, but he could have that type of early success in the right offense. If he
He's a
gets it.
guy that's going to go somewhere and be a backup quarterback. And if he's in the right, if a team that is smart, that runs a West Coast Shanahan style type system, takes him again, like a Miami, like you mentioned, right? Somebody like that, they take him. If their starter gets hurt and he comes in and he can click on that timing offense, he's going to produce. Don't be shocked if this guy's playing next year and producing if he's in the right system. And people are going to be like, wow, how did the whole NFL draft community miss on Curtis Work? And it's like, well, yeah, if you put him in the right situation, he's quick enough with his delivery and he's such a good processor, you can see him succeeding. You know, that won't make him some great quarterback, but that's a valuable quarterback for a QB room. That's how I look at him.
One thing I want to say to like the Dart Rourke thing, like obviously we think like you look at our grades, we think Dart's more talented than Rourke. Dart is more talented than Rourke. Here's the thing though. We have 3 things that aren't just like physical traits that go more into the intangibles. Dart was brutal. If anybody watched our episode last week, and if you didn't, I recommend you go back and watch it. He was absolutely brutal. The worst person in high leverage situations out of this entire class. So that
It
killed his
matters.
stock a little bit. That guy could have been more higher up he could have been higher. He would have been higher in these guys, and he would have been closer to like a Jalen Milroe if he was good in those situations. But he's not, and that's a big reason why you don't hear Dart's names with these other guys. So it does matter. If he had the high leverage success that Rourke had, he would be looked potentially as like a first rounder, but he's not. Like it's a big knock on him.
If he got better at that, I think you'd be viewing Jackson Dart very differently because he
Mm-hmm.
has all the tools. But
Yep.
he's not good at it right now. There's no evidence that people get much better at that. But he has a chance. He's also situation dependent, like Rourke. He's gonna have to.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's gonna have to go to an offense that's a lot different than what Lane Kiffin offered him. More of a middle of the field, timing based offense as opposed to Lane Kiffin style offense, where I don't think they did him much favors.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, I agree. He's more talented. Let's go to QB5, our final guy. And what QB you do him here, but what QB class would be complete without an Ohio State quarterback?
Yeah. I mean,
But not the Ohio State quarterback you guys are thinking of.
nope. We are going to be talking about MetLife McCord, Kyle
Mhm.
McCord. Kyle McCord, quarterback out of Syracuse, 6'3", 320 pounds, former Ohio State quarterback, former five-star recruit. He's a senior. He's in his fourth year. He's a true senior. So he has to declare this year because he wasn't around for COVID and they blew his redshirt year. So this was his final year, unfortunately for him. But he did walk away with second team All ACC and was third team All Big 12 last year. Really impressive stats this year. He threw the living shit out of the football. That was a big reason for it. But 65.8
They, they
completion percentage.
they never ran the ball.
No, did not. 4,326 yards, 29 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, 7.8 yards per attempt. So not the greatest for how high those yards are. 143.7 rating, negative 58 rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns. His father played for Rutgers, so something a little bit on his background, but we were interested about Kyle McCord. You look at his stats here, if you're watching on YouTube, 90.5 PFF grade. I mean, some really impressed, 96.7 deep grade. There's some stuff to really be impressed about by this guy. Overall, I thought he was a solid quarterback. He had a good foundation of tools, and I think it was mostly highlighted by his touch on his passes. I thought he had a really good touch to place a ball where only his receiver could get it. Improved his decision making a lot from Ohio State. It was brutal last year, and his decision making got a lot better this year, and he has a pretty quick release. His ball placement makes him effective, I think, both in the short game. I thought he was very good on those short passes, and also on deep passes. I thought his deep, like you can see it that deep grade. I thought his deep passes were really impressive. And he has pretty close to a prototypical size for an NFL quarterback. And you saw a lot of, like I said, you saw a lot of growth this year. So that part of it's really encouraging. And I really wish he had another year of college football to kind of like show it off, see if he can get to the next level. Because let's kind of get into some of the negatives here. Lacks mobility, definitely has an issue, and I think that will carry over to the NFL. This is a league where you need to have a little bit of mobility, and Kyle McCord really doesn't have it. You can't really extend plays or evade pressure. I thought he had a pretty average arm. It wasn't bad. I think on the lower end of average, but I think it's enough to work. And I thought one issue I thought he could be hesitant to take shots. I would see things, come open, and I would be waiting for him to take it. And I felt like he was overly conservative at time and passed up those opportunities. One thing I mentioned was I thought he was really good in the short game and really good in the long game. to be successful in the NFL, you need more than just short game, long game. The NFL is a lot of that intermediate area, and I don't think he was very good there. You see that in the grade, 79.8, big drop off, but he didn't use it a lot. For as much as he passed, I mean, you see he was fourth in the country in deep yards, 18th in screen yards. Like he was, I mean, a lot of that just goes to how much they pass the damn football, but he didn't use the intermediate area as much as I would have liked him to use it. Um, let's see. And then I thought he had some issues with going through his progressions. I could see him get stuck on early reads and wouldn't necessarily find the open guy often enough. Overall, I thought he profiled. He's a game manager. That's what I would say. I thought maybe he had a potential to be a starter. It's hard. I wouldn't say it off of this year. If he got another year in college football, I'd feel better to maybe have that chance. I think overall he's going to be a good backup in this league, especially a system that really emphasizes his ability to work the short and the long game and doesn't ask him too much to be like a full complete quarterback. So definitely a lot of limitations to his game, and I wasn't overly wowed altogether. Just passed the ball a shit ton and put up a lot of stats. What are your thoughts, Sal?
Yeah, I don't have much to add. He's mid,
Yeah.
he's solidly mid. He's kind of okay at everything. Nothing,
Mhm.
no major red flag negatives in his game. I didn't see any glaring deficiencies, right? Like he's athletic enough, he's got enough arm, he's got enough processing, he's got enough, pocket presence, makes enough plays, can kind of throw the ball everywhere, just good enough. But there was nothing outstanding about his game. Very boring to watch.
Yes.
No wow factor with this guy, which I'm okay with if you can move the ball and you're productive. Um, but solid player. Don't think he's a starter at the NFL level right now. Could he go somewhere and get a shot to start and prove to be a capable starter? Yes, I think so. I think he has. I think he checks enough boxes at an average level that if things go right for him, he can find himself in a place where he may be a starter for a couple of years somewhere, right? I mean, I
Mhm.
wouldn't be shocked if that happened, because he has kind of everything. There's no major exit here, major problem. But just to highlight what you said about like if people are impressed by his stats, and they're impressive, right? A lot of yards, a lot of touchdowns. But here's the thing: Cam Ward threw the ball a lot this year. He had 435 attempts.
He threw a
Shedeur
ton.
Sanders, he threw a lot. He had 435 attempts. Shedeur Sanders threw the ball a lot. He had 458 attempts. Kurtis Rourke didn't throw it a lot. He only had 388 attempts. Tom McCord threw the ball 559 times. So he threw it more than he had 100 more passes than Cam Ward, who was constantly throwing the ball.
Yeah.
Right? He threw it 100 more times. They never ran the ball. It was ridiculous. It was just drop back throw, drop back throw, drop back throw, and it's actually tedious to watch. Um, but so he has a lot of production numbers. His average depth of target wasn't bad, 8.6 yards.
Mhm.
Not bad, but it's okay. His adjusted completion percentage, like you mentioned, 75%, solid, not bad. His pressure to sack rate, solid, not bad. His time to throw, very good, actually. Um, Across the board, just solid, not bad, is how I would describe him. Right? There's nothing that stood out. Nothing bad, but nothing that stood out. If you want, do you want to get into his leverage stuff before we jump into the charts?
Sure. And I want to say one thing too is like Alex brought up, he had that 5 interception game for first Pitt. And I think it's
Hmm.
interesting to help lead this into it. Um, I will say, as bad as it is, you don't want to see that. If I liked what I saw from Kyle McCord, I'm okay like throwing out the worst game and kind of throwing as an outlier. I think I sometimes it happens to guys and they have bad games, but it is interesting to look at some of these high leverage stats and see where that might show up when we look at it. So he had interesting stats in this. So um, he was a little bit back and forth. He's one of those guys that didn't have the best stats, but had a good conversion rate. And when I say didn't have the best stats, I had really, really bad stats. So let's get into it. He went 38-64, 59.38 completion percentage. He had 529 yards, 8.266 yards percent. Also far, not good, not bad. On third and long, he had 2 touchdowns. Okay. He had 7 interceptions on
Oof.
third and long. Um, 24 first down. So he had 37.5 conversion percentage. Very good. I mean, that's only behind Ward, Rourke, and Klubnik. So that's good. But he had a 56.84 quarterback rating, which was last out of all these guys we talked about, even worse than Carson Beck, who was really bad in those situations. I mean, 2 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. I mean, you got to give some credit for, I guess, just being ballsy enough to put the ball in danger to make a play, but because that's basically seemingly like where almost more than half of his interceptions came from these situations. But yeah, not a great look there.
That's tough.
Yeah.
So again, let's put up his we might just to be consistent, let's put up
Mm-hmm.
his spray chart. And it's not as pretty as the last couple of guys we put up. It's not as good as Klubnik. It's not as good as it's certainly not as good as Rourke. There are a lot of areas in the field. It's like hodgepodge of terrible like performance, specifically intermediate right.
Yep.
10 of 30 for 142, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, and a 32 rating. But you go all the way to intermediate left, and it's 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, 13 to 21. 124
Mm-hmm.
NFL rating. Um, Short area, he's kind of consistently fine all around. His deep game is insane. Like
Yeah.
his middle deep area, 153 NFL rating. He's for 15 of 19 for 454 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interception. On the right, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, 116 rating. On the left, 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. So a lot of his picks are to the left and on the deep balls. And that's where it's still not bad, but it was his weakest area. There's nothing that's, again, like when you look at his spray chart, it's very unimpressive and it's very unconcerning, except for one little segment. That's him in a nutshell. He's not giving you any big red lights anywhere about his game, but he's also not making you excited about any aspect of his game.
So when you look at it, I think is interesting that I mentioned intermediate areas he didn't have as much success in. You pointed out 10 for 30, the outside right, and the intermediate 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions for 32.9. The middle, 703 yards,
Yeah.
that's good, but 3 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. That again, some
Yeah.
struggles there. What I think is really interesting here, you look at outside left, like you said, had success there, 5 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, but these are passes of 10 plus, right? He
Yep.
he had 159 yards on 13 completions. That must mean there is absolutely no yak on any of these.
Mhm.
None of these like broke because and they were all like barely past the sticks. Like that's a really low yardage total for 13. Same on the right to some extent. Like no yak.
Yeah, because the ball is placed in such a way where it's fine, it's catchable, but it's not like a great
Mhm.
ball placement. Um, it's also not coming in with like the velocity to give his receiver a chance to like break away and do something with it, right? Like
Mhm.
people close on it. So it just he throws a catchable football, the ball gets there. Again, like this is very Daniel Jonesian, right? Like
Mhm.
completion percentages look good and the numbers are fine. Like guys catch the ball, but they can't do anything with it because it's not there in time, it's not there placed perfectly, and that's it, right? The guy goes down. That's a lot of his film.
Yep.
Um, Scoring. Let's go to his grades.
Yep. I'll
Just as
pull it up.
boring as his game.
Yeah.
Yeah. I kept hitting threes until I thought it was like in a coma. I gave pretty much like I think you did almost the same thing. Um, Gave him a 3 for mechanics, average, 3 for arm strength, average, 3 for accuracy, average, 3 for release, average. You gave him a 4 for touch. I gave him a 3. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, Processing, you gave him a 2. I gave him a 3. But again, his touch 4 is probably closer to 3 than it is 5. His processing 2 is probably closer to 3 than it is 1,
Yeah,
right?
I just
So
thought.
slightly.
Sorry, I was just say the reason I just said
Go
I
ahead.
give him a processing is just because like some of that intermediate area, it takes some getting through progressions and finding those guys. When you see guys who throw short and short long, you kind of show them the tape. That's a lot of times the guys who get the ball out quick. You can see his quick,
Yep.
release time. Is those are the ones that you have to like wait to develop and read as those intermediate areas.
Leadership 3, mobility. You gave him a 3. I gave him a 2, but I guess I could have given him a 3. I didn't love his mobility.
I honestly probably
Um,
should have gave him a 2. No, I'm with you.
yeah. Resilience 2. I gave him a 3. I'm not entirely sure why you gave him a 2 there, but I'm curious to hear it.
I think part of it was the pit game and just continuing to stack mistakes and just let a game get completely out of control on himself.
I threw that one out because it was such an outlier,
Yeah, I
you
hear
know.
you. And
Um,
then
cl-
and
yeah.
then some of those high leverage things.
No, and that goes into clutch. So I gave him a
Yeah.
3, but I can understand why you would give him a 2 based on the leverage
Mhm.
scores you just gave me. Giants grade 2. I don't think he fits here at all. And a goon factor, I gave him a 2. You gave him a 3. Overall, we both landed around. You gave him a 2.8. I gave him a 2.9. So below average NFL player, basically. Um, Day 3. I guess there's a chance he doesn't get drafted. You know,
Yeah.
I think he's the kind of guy who sometimes you're like, oh, he didn't get drafted. Oh, okay. Like I
Hmm.
guess I can see because there's
Yeah.
just nothing. There's no redeeming feature that's outstanding about him.
I wouldn't
His
be
pr-
excited if we drafted him. Like no matter what quarterback we had, I wouldn't feel great about drafting Kyle McCord.
correct. So very boring. So as you saw this episode, that's our 5. I'll recap them real quick. Quinn Ewers, Carson Beck, and this is not in order of their scores, but Quinn Ewers, Carson Beck, Cade Klubnik, Kurtis Rourke, and Kyle McCord. And out of those 5, I think it's worth mentioning very, very quickly. The giant, the big issue here is, and I put this on Twitter, these idiots better not fucking win a game.
Yes.
Do not win a football game. You don't want to be living here. Do not live here, right? This is a no-go zone. You don't If you have missed on quarterback because you won some stupid game down the stretch and now you're deciding between Carson Beck or Quinn Ewers or freaking, whoever's left, Curtis Rourke, if you have fucked up big time, like
Yep.
do not win a football game. This is not a drill. Do not win a football game. I don't want to hear any of these guys' names get called by the Giants. This is not a knock on them, but we have bigger fish to fry than dealing with these guys. Um, but if there's any take-home message from any of these guys that's independent of the Giants, it's that there are some guys who have talent here. And I think that if they go back to school and they develop, they have a chance to really rise up the boards. I don't think this is a talentless batch at all. Last year's batch actually was kind of annoying to go through also, the back 5, although there was much more talent at the top of that back 5.
Mhm.
Um, this year's back 5, I think, Beck clearly is a guy that has talent. If he goes back to school, and I think he will, and he puts together a more consistently good year and goes back closer to where he was in 22, his stock will rise again.
You get back
Um,
in the first round.
Quinn Ewers, I don't know where he's going. I really just don't know what's
Yeah.
going to happen with him. I'll watch it. He's got the talent, but we have to see him actually do it for once with consistency. Klubnik is the one guy that I'm from this batch that my take home was I need to see what Cade Klubnik does next year. I was
Hmm.
actually impressed by the the traits and the physical ability and what he put on film despite his processing issues. And I thought, this is a young kid. Yes, I am paid by the VR headset guys out of Germany. So I'm going to say it again. He's a guy that if he can do things to improve his processing, I can see his stock really being the one guy whose stock surges from this batch for next year. I don't think he should declare this year, although he's going to be in the playoffs, so you just never know. That's the 5. Before we
Hmm.
close this out, because we're approaching 2 hours, it is playoff week, and we should get into this, right? Because this is fun. Um,
Also,
First rounds. Go ahead.
before we move off this, let's just give them our order of how we ended up ranking these guys.
Oh, sure.
So I think I have it. So we have Kurtis Rourke as our number one out of this group. We have Cade Klubnik as our number two out of this group. We have a tie for three. We have Quinn Ewers as about a 2.95, it looks like. And we have Kyle McCord as a 2.95 there as well. And then we have Carson Beck last with a 2.8.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Carson Beck ended up QB 10,
Yeah.
by the scoring system. But he had a bad year.
Mm-hmm.
He had a bad year, and it just from QB1 to whatever he is now, he's got to go back to school. Like he
Yeah.
fucked up this year. He's got to go back and he's got to rebuild his stock. All right, let's get into the playoff. It is playoff week, and we will see what's going on here. So I know most of you already know. So the 20th, we have our first games. Actually, we have one game on the 20th, I believe, right? Yes, we have one game on the 20th, and that is this Friday, if I'm not mistaken, right? In Indiana at Notre Dame. So Kurtis Rourke, we just went over, and
Mm-hmm.
Kirk Cignetti's team at Indiana, number 10, going against number 7 Notre Dame, which has had a resurgent season. And after
Mm-hmm.
their bad loss to UNI earlier in the year, has been really unstoppable. A guy who barely missed our list, honestly, who we thought about putting on it. No, we really didn't. But a guy who we could have, Riley Leonard, who's playing really good football. Not good quarterback football, but good football for Notre Dame. He's done well. Um, that's the game Friday night to watch. It's going to be a good one, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Now Indiana has struggled against the better teams, so it wouldn't shock me if Notre Dame steamrolls them because Notre Dame is they're better than the 7 seed. But it might be a good game. It's a good one Friday night.
Very cool getting
Saturday,
all Indiana game there.
correct, and that's an 8 o'clock game. Um, Saturday we have 3 games, and this is going to be a fun day. So
Mm-hmm.
your day starts at 12 o'clock with a real fun one. I know DKIT wants to go to this one, um, but it's not in Texas. It's number 11 SMU at number 6 Penn State in Happy Valley. SMU was a really really good team this year. A lot of fun. They held on for most like towards the end of the year after Miami had some losses. I thought they were going to win the ACC, but they lost to Cade Klubnik. They lost to Cade Klubnik and Clemson in the ACC title game, and so they are on the road against Penn State and Drew Allar. And we went over Drew Allar in our previous quarterback episode. This is a young man to watch to see. I think he's going to go back to school, and the hints are that he's probably going back to school.
Mm-hmm.
But Penn State has a pathway to potentially get all the way to the Orange Bowl, which is the semifinals. Um, and Drew Aller has a chance to have 3 games on display before even considering the national title game. That's the kind of showcase that can change a young man's stock. So watch that game for those two. The 4 o'clock game is Clemson at Texas. So number 12 Clemson, Cade Klubnik's team we just talked about against Quinn Ewers' team,
Yep.
Texas. It's a fun matchup. Um, I'm pretty sure Texas is going to kick the shit out of Clemson, um, but you never know. You never know what
Mm-hmm.
happens in these games. Texas is a more talented squad. But listen, man, Cade Klubnik is playing better football than Quinn Ewers right now.
Yeah.
You just never know. Um, and then the 8 o'clock game on Saturday night is the primetime matchup. And this is a doozy. Number 9, Tennessee at number 8, Ohio State. Ohio State was our preseason pick to win the national title. At least I think mine certainly. That is a
Mm-hmm.
loaded roster.
Yeah.
They really have the talent to go all the way, but they find themselves in the 8 seed. They have 2 losses, if I'm not mistaken. Um, and or do they have 1 loss? I can't remember. No, they have 2 losses, right? They lost to
Mm-hmm.
Michigan and they lost to Oregon. So 2 losses, and they're going up against
Yeah.
Tennessee. Um, so Ohio State has a ton of talent. They have a two-headed monster at running back, which is the best in the country. Quinshawn Judkins and Travion Henderson, running backs that you've heard of already. They have maybe the best young wide receiver in the country, and Jeremiah Smith. He's a freshman. They're loaded on the offensive line. Their defense is stacked with seniors. It's a good team. Tennessee has a kid that you guys should pay attention to for this episode next year.
Yep.
DJ Yamuleva, who right now is
Nico.
probably, I'm sorry, DJ, Nico. I'm sorry, I turned him into the other Samoan. Nico Yamuleva. Yeah, Nico Yamuleva, if I'm saying his name right. Really, really freakishly good athlete. I
Hmm.
think he's 6'6",
Yeah.
and he can do. There's like nothing he can't do on a football field from a quarterback standpoint. Athletic. He's an athletically gifted young man. Um, he right now he's probably prospectus QB1 going into the 2026 NFL draft. Um, and so this is his first chance to showcase his skills in that game. So watch out for that game.
Yeah. He
Um,
fell off a little bit this year, but like
mhm.
as far as like going into a year, like he has true like number one pick in most draft classes type upside. Like he could be one of those top quarterbacks. He has that upside. He may not reach it, but he has that upside.
Yeah. And Tennessee also has other players too. They have draft. I mean, all these teams have kids who are going to be in the NFL
James
draft. They're
Pierce.
yep. James Pierce, the one of the top edge rushers in the country. So these are good teams. I mean, a lot of the players you've heard of over the year, they're here. I mean, the reason these teams are here is because they have NFL draftable type talent on their roster. I will say this as a prediction, and this is probably going to blow up in my face, but last year when we went through our process of looking at all the prospects position by position, the team that seemed to come up every single week with players was Michigan. Every
Hmm.
week, Michigan. Michigan has one. Michigan has two guys here. Michigan, and we started adding them up, and we're like, Michigan's going to win the national title. How can you have this many NFL ready prospects and not win the national title? It's a very talented team. It's well coached. And sure enough, they won the national title. Um, this year, the team that best represents that, in my opinion, is actually Notre Dame. They
Hmm.
have a lot of talent, a lot of upperclassmen talent that will be going into the NFL draft this year or next year. That and they're hitting their strides. I mean, I actually wouldn't be shocked if Michigan went all the way. I think
Notre,
Michigan. I mean, not
Notre
Michigan.
Dame.
I wouldn't be shocked if Notre Dame would went all the way and could actually win the national title. Just because I'm going to stick with the same methodology I used last year. We look at 100 when we're all said and done, right? We're looking at 150 kids in depth, right? Something like that. Yeah, T, tell them. It's hard for me to ignore the number of Michigan players, especially on defense, that we reviewed that are clearly going to the NFL. So I'm going to stick with that methodology and say Michigan. The other two teams that come to
Notre
mind
Dame.
are Notre. I keep saying Michigan. I'm sorry.
You do.
Notre Dame, Notre Dame, and the other two teams that come to mind are Oregon and Ohio State. For the same reasons. But I think Notre Dame, if you they've been quietly dominating for the last couple of months. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say they're my pick to win the national title. What about
Yeah,
you?
yeah. No, I think it's a good pick. I mean, I think Notre Dame probably is the best defense in the entire country, and you saw it on display at the end of the year. They were kicking ass and absolutely just dominating down the stretch of this season. Notre Dame probably a good pick. Um, yeah, I would say that or Oregon. It's kind of where I'm at. Those are probably the two most talented teams in the country.
And looking at the brackets, um, they wouldn't face each other until the national title game. So I'm tired. I'm sorry. If Notre Dame beats Indiana, they'll get Georgia in the Sugar Bowl in the second round.
Hmm.
I think they beat Georgia. I
Yeah,
just think they're better than Georgia.
I agree.
I know. Sorry, Matt, but I think they're better than Georgia. Oregon has a bye. They will face the winner of Ohio State, Tennessee. That is a tough draw. They barely survived Ohio State the first time. They wouldn't have survived it if Will Howard understood what sliding means with the clock running out.
Yeah.
And so, like Oregon's a very good team. They're loaded with talent, but they have had some near misses this year, where you're like, are you? Am I sure this team is going to run the table and win this whole thing? I don't know.
Mhm.
Um, so then if they assuming they get through that, I think it's going to be Ohio State, Oregon in the Rose Bowl in the second round. Uh, the winner of that game is gonna face off against the winner of Arizona State versus whoever comes out of Texas Clemson. Let's assume it's Texas for a second. I think Oregon Texas is a tough game, and the winner of that, I would say, is probably facing off against Notre Dame in the national championship game. I wouldn't be surprised if the national championships actually, you know, I mean, Oregon Notre Dame sounds right to me as a national title game, but we'll see. Um, but anyway, um, that's my pick. We'll see how it goes. That's an episode. It's a long one. And again, I want to apologize to everybody for being a bit late. Had a few things to take care of, but we've done our 10 quarterbacks. We are done. We're not going to talk about the Giants anymore. They're all I'm going to say again is they're facing Michael Penix Jr. and they better lose these fucking games. You got anything to close us out, man?
No, man, just appreciate everyone who's still here past midnight. Really appreciate you guys. Awesome commitment. And we're gonna take a week off, but we'll see you back after that.
Have a nice Christmas, and we'll see you probably right before New Year's. Go Giants, sort of. No, I'm sorry.
Go
Go
Falcons.
Falcons.
See you guys next
Thank you,
week.
guys.